Good morning, folks, and welcome to Shelfie Saturday. Yes, Shelfie Sunday is now Shelfie Saturday, as I've decided that for most Sundays, me and Judge Evie's Living for Crits stream on Twitch is going to count as my daily video. Not that there might not be a second one tomorrow, but it's not going to be a Shelfie Sunday. So we're doing this today. And after yesterday's vote on Twitter, results are in, and the subject of today's Shelfie vlog is the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. I kind of thought this one was going to get it, but I had a little bit of hope for the AD&D Second Edition Arms and Equipment Guide. I love that book. We will talk about that at some point in the future. I love the back of this, though. Hear ye, hear ye. Whether you're a player or a dungeon master, the Dungeons and Dragons Rules Cyclopedia is now the comprehensive source book you need for the original fantasy role-playing game. For ages 12 and up, the cyclopedia contains the complete game system and hundreds of features, including a lot of stuff that I'm not going to read everything for. And I've said this many, many times over the years. You may have even heard me say this, that if I was to be stranded somewhere, desert isle, the middle of the Canadian frosted outback, like the video game The Long Dark, hunting wolves and deer and stuff. And I had one book and one book alone to use for all my role-playing needs. This would be that book. And I think I still stand by that decision. I've shifted over the years a few times. I've considered other RPGs to be that book, but I still think there's more in here in this one book comprehensively than most other game products out there that are one book products. Sure, I could do everything I want to do with a Shadow of the Demon Lord book. Sure, I could do the same thing with DCC, but there's something that's said when I see the font from this, and when I open it up and just kind of like look at the old art and the old rules, that just, it gives me that. I know I've talked bad about the word before, but yes, it does give me some of that nostalgia feel. All right, now this book here was compiled and developed by Aaron Alston. Very important to note that it was compiled. What that means is that the rules had been written previously already in the boxes, the box sets for this. The basic expert companion master sets of the game. They all went in here. The cover is a Jeff Easley cover, the back cover by Robin Robb, and all throughout the art on the inside was by Terry Dykstra. And the art inside of this book is a lot of fun. It's a bit different than what we got in the box sets, of course, but I quite enjoyed it. There's not a lot of art in this book. This book is very text and chart heavy. So when you're flipping through it, you're not going to have these big sweeping vistas until you get to the very back of the book, and then you're getting maps of the known world of Mystara. That in the very back of this thing. You don't have these big full page pieces of art in the works. The cartography was Dennis Kauth and Frey Graphics. This was published in 1991 by TSR, and like I said, it was a compilation of the basic expert companion master rules with a little bit of immortal in there. So I guess does this count as the I in Beckme? I remember there being immortals, like the Wrath of the Immortals box. I thought that had more rules on what being an immortal was and everything, and there's like 4 pages in here, so enough to start you off. This is part of a treasured collection of mine, and of this era of books, which also includes a Dungeon Master screen, the Dungeons and Dragons creature catalog. Fun book, especially since most of the monsters in here you're not going to find in AD&D Second Edition, which means if you had this and that book, this book actually was something different for you to own. But it also means that if you use just this book for monsters, you're going to have some weird things fighting your party. But I like this book. It includes, I own 3 of the creature crucibles. Top Ballista, which is essentially like gnomish Top Gun. Top Ballista introduced you to gnomes and flying gnomes, sky gnomes, and the city of Serene. Tall Tales of the Wee Folk allowed you to play brownies and sprites and fairies and centaurs and stuff. And finally, my favorite, which I would love to cover one of these days, is Night Howlers, which allowed you to play weird creatures, lycanthropes. I have 3 adventures from this era as well. Well, one of them was in the what's it called, the D&D screen. So I have two adventures from this era. I have Rage of the Rakasta, which had rules for letting you play a Rakasta afterwards. And then I had Quest for the Silver Sword, which I have run at least once, maybe twice. This is a pretty fun adventure. This adventure is great because I have all these for it. It had a big map that, you know, had like 5-foot squares and everything. But also, it had, I have never taken them out, it had cutout monsters. I had meant to use this a few times, but ended up always using Hero Quest miniatures for it. So anyway, if you're not familiar with basic D&D, from the good old days, it featured 8 classes. That's right. This book has 8 classes in it. It has the fighter, the magic user, the cleric, the thief, the dwarf, the halfling, and the mystic. Goodman Games. Where was the mystic in Dungeon Crawl Classics? That's essentially a monk class. Very similar rules to the monk from AD&D First Edition, which was missing in AD&D Second Edition. So if you were a gamer circa 1991 and didn't have the monk rules from AD&D First Ed, this was your monk. This is the closest you got until 3rd edition when the monk was revealed again. You kind of had that weird fighting monk kit from AD&D Second Edition, the clerics, the complete book of clerics. It wasn't the same. Everything you'd expect in one of these old school games was in or is in this book. So 3d6 in order for stats to hit tables, although it does give you the rules for how to work out THAC0, which is really easy. And if you complain you don't understand THAC0, what you're trying to tell people is you don't understand subtraction. If your character is a THAC0 of 16 and you're trying to hit something with an armor class of 5, you just need to roll an 11 or higher in a d20. 16 minus 5 equals 11. Roll higher than that. It's not hard. If you have a +1 magic sword, your magic sword THAC0 is a 15 then for that sword. Just basic, you know, just keeping track of stuff on your character sheet. It's not a challenge. So yeah, descending armor class is a thing. And so few hit points that your thief, who only has a d4 hit points, will probably die about 9 times, you know, per session as a first level character. And it also has the weirdest as hell level progression for demi-humans. I never understood level progression for demi-humans. Even as a kid, it just disincentivized being anything besides a human, because if you were playing a campaign that went past, you know, 8th level, like halflings get to level 8, then they stop, then they just start going up in experience points that stop at, you're at 8, and you start getting attack ranks A through K. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why it's a thing, but it was a thing. Now, when we first played basic D&D, all we had as kids was the red and blue boxes. So, you know, this beauty, you know, featured some rules that we had never seen before. Weapon mastery, which was one of them, which was specialization from AD&D Second Ed on speed. I don't know how this didn't end up in other games, and really, who's advanced now? AD&D Second Edition. So you have this chart, and every class got so many points in weapon mastery. This is an optional rule. in weapon mastery at first level, and you could choose to spread them out into other weapons, or alternatively, you could put them all in one and become like an epic master in one weapon. Pretty early on in the game, this rule essentially made fighters just incredibly badass. First off, it added a bonus to hit if you became skilled enough with the weapon, enough ranks in one weapon. Second off, it gave rules for being able to purchase training in higher levels. So get a lot of money in your hands. That's great. Go ahead and purchase some training. It might take you 12 weeks to become a grandmaster, but how is it different from a wizard learning high level spells? I think this added some weird swing at first level when you had a character that was essentially a master in a weapon, but for later levels it made a lot of sense. For instance, if a character has a two-handed sword, all right, you have a fight with a two-handed sword at first level, and you throw 4 ranks into weapon mastery, you now have you have 2 attacks. One is going to do 3d6 plus 3 damage. The other is 2d8 plus 3 damage, and you have a stun and deflect bonus. I gotta think that now that I'm reading this, like there's no way you can throw that all into your character at first level, was there? Maybe I was reading this wrong at the time, and I don't know. I don't know. I remember we played this. We let the few times we let fighters throw all of those points into one weapon if they wanted, and dang if it didn't make them amazing. So yeah, weapon mastery, pretty cool. General skills. It was like an early proficiency system, or not early, because proficiencies were in I think first and second edition. It was an alternate proficiency system that was a bit more vague, and there was some weird crossover with the thief skills. However, if it did allow for characters like magic users to have a lot of other skills to use. So when you've cast your single ventriloquism spell for the day, you have some other things that might help you out when you're running away from the shopkeeper whose dagger you stole. Go back to other videos. I talk about that. Sieges and mass combat. I still don't know how these rules work. They're in here. But if I am stranded somewhere for a decade on an island, I guess I'll figure them out at that point. There are creation rules for strongholds and dominions in this book that I still use for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I remember when my friends and we were playing through the Purple Sorcerer's Sunken City campaign, and during that campaign, they got hold of a keep and a small fort, and we needed rules for how much it was going to cost to upgrade it. We used the rules out of this book to for that and for finding hirelings, and they worked fantastic. There's also rules in here. There's conversion guide. Is a conversion guide in here for D&D to second edition and back and forth. Basic D&D to AD&D second edition. So there's a good bit in here for if you have a campaign that's shifting. I don't know anyone who ever shifted a campaign from one to the other. If anything, it just let you. I'm sorry, I just touched my nose. It did give an option if you wanted to take and make a gnome character. So I guess you had a ninth class in here. But really, if you're gonna play a gnome, you you gotta play a sky gnome. You gotta. I mean, there's no excuse not to play a sky gnome. Flying a ballista firing biplane. Or flying a ballista firing biplane. Yes. Okay. Anyway, my experience. It's early. It's 7:27 a.m. and I'm recording this. So this is my commitment to get this done. 'Cause I have 2 games today. I've got D&D 5e coming up here in a second, and I've got Shadow the Demon Lord this afternoon in person. So man, I'm trying to get a lot done for you here on this daily vlog before I've had more than 4 sips of my first cup of coffee. My experience with this book here, I got my hands on one of these first when this wasn't mine. It was actually my brother's. This one's not. This is mine, but my first one was my brother's. My parents got me a bunch of AD&D second edition stuff for Christmas, and they got Tom, my brother, a copy of this book, as well as the screen and the Creature Crucible. And yeah, they I think the Creature Crucible they got him was this one, Night Howlers. In fact, Tom, this is your book, and it's my favorite from the series, so it's my book now. And I guess I stole it from my brother, but he's a lawyer now, so nothing bad can come out of me stealing one of his books, right? Tom only ran basic D&D a few times. He was way more of a player than a dungeon master. And I grabbed that book. I don't know what he did with his D&D Rules Cyclopedia. Tom, if you have this, it's worth a good bit of money. Just in case you want to make a few extra bucks off of that. If lawyering's not doing well for you. So I didn't do anything with this book really in the 90s. I was an AD&D second edition player and dungeon master. That was where my heart was. I didn't discover this book and realize how great it was until the mid 2000s when I had grown tired of D&D third edition and I was online and I discovered the OSR. This is around 2004. I discovered what we would now call the OSR, notably Richard Tong's Oddities zine, his online zine. And I have old videos of this. You could kind of go back through my. I'll post. I will post a link to one of those old OSR. I called it the OS Revolution. What did I call it? I'll post a link to one of those below, so you've got that. You can look at that whole journey. Uh, Now, several years later, I'm on an NSR, a new school revolution. I'm going through it right now personally, but back in the mid 2000s, I was so tired of third edition. I had a really challenging gaming group I was playing with, and I missed the simplicity of older days of gaming. So between eBay and used bookstores, I was able to start amassing this collection of books. And I started running basic D&D out of the Rules Cyclopedia for my wife's cousins from Ohio whenever they would visit us in Pittsburgh. I had a little campaign for them together, and the four of them would play. And then a few years in the line, the very first Dungeons and Dragons campaign I ran for my eldest son Eli was using these rules. And a few years later, in 2013, I introduced Evie into the game as well. She was really young. I mean, she wasn't even 6 yet, and it was her first game, I think. Might have been her second game. I think her first game was technically still fourth edition, but this was her second game. This was the game she played more of. And in 2013, my wife Jen joined us finally, and she agreed to play RPGs again, and she was Eric the cleric in our D&D game, our bedtime D&D game. Uh, Eventually, I would shift away from playing this, and I discovered what we would call retro clones. Most notably, what was my favorite, which is Basic Fantasy RPG. I really love this game. I played a lot of this game. This is Chris Gonnerman's just wonderful series of books where it just took and simplified a lot out of uh, out of what you have found in the other D&D works. It did break out race and class, which I liked. I still think that's something that Dungeon Crawl Classics should have considered doing. Another game I discovered was Adventures in the Eastmark, which is, I think this is the only box that got to the U.S. This is a translation from a Spanish retro clone, but I have one of the boxes for this. The art for this is absolutely fantastic. Um, so anyway, those were the retro clones I was playing, and not long after, I ended up finding Dungeon Crawl Classics in 2014 and getting heavy into that, as a lot of folks know. Overall, the D&D Rules Cyclopedia is a cornerstone book that really belongs on the shelf of every Dungeons and Dragons fan, if you can get it. A used copy of this is going to cost you $100 or more based on the quality. And be careful, there is a print on demand version. I will post the link below, so if you want to get a copy for the rules, you can do that. But when I went online just to see what was out there for print on demand copies, I'm sorry, for used copies, I saw a lot of print on demand copies being masquerading as original copies. Just so you know, the print on demand hardcover is $27.50. Okay, that's the cost right now for the print on demand hardcover, and I'll post that link below as well. I saw print on demand copies for like $57. So don't get ripped off. Get it from Drive Through RPG. Just don't don't get taken. You really want to be careful and make sure it's an original if you're getting it. So like this is what it looks like. I guess like the print on demand version, but it's not. So, um, anyway, at some point, I would love to run a full campaign with this fantastic old school product. However, I don't know when it's going to happen. And yeah, it's 7:33. I got to get ready for the first session of my new school campaign for D&D 5th edition Talus, which is coming up here very at 8 a.m. So I got to get ready. So I hope you enjoyed this little retrospective, and thanks to everyone who voted on Twitter. And we'll be back next Saturday with another Shelfie, and tomorrow with another video, maybe two videos. I might have something special up my sleeve that I'm working on here. We will see. It's not a vlog like this. It's going to be something unique, but very timely. Thanks for watching. Play nice, kiddos, and I will see you all tomorrow.